Hello and welcome everyone to ElectionSpeakers.com, the place for unique critique of the important speakers of this 2012 presidential campaign. My name is Dr. Dennis Becker, and I'm the host for these special programs, which are designed to give voters the valuable information needed to make a confident decision on November the 6th. We'll be watching and listening to the candidates and others who are trying to win your vote. Their talking techniques and their tactics are our exclusive topic for this unique critique. Now, joining me on today's program is my co-host, Lori Schlaff, who's a senior coaching partner and director of the executive education program at the Speech Improvement Company. Lori, welcome.
Great to be here.
Also joining us today are our senior speech coach, Robin Maxfield.
Hi, Dennis.
And we have a special guest with us tonight, of course, and we always have special guests on the show tonight. And today we're welcoming Kellyanne Dignan, who's the Associate Vice President of Rasky Berline Strategic Communication. Welcome, Kellyanne.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And finally joining us tonight is the president of the Speech Improvement Company, Ethan Becker. Ethan is the author of the internationally best-selling book, Mastering Communication at Work. Welcome, Ethan.
Hey, it's great to be back in the USA.
Great to be. Where have you been? What do you mean back in the USA? Where have you been?
I've been in Malaysia actually, doing some coaching over there, and it's nice to be home. I'm still on Malaysian time right now, so
so if you sound a little bit drowsy,
a little jet lagged.
Are they
but stayed awake for the debate.
This debate didn't wake you up tonight?
Yeah.
Come on.
We'll get into it.
Are they into the elections in Malaysia?
Not really.
Not really.
No, but once you leave the U.S., it's interesting tea talk, but there's a lot more news outside of the U.S.
Well, we're going to be doing a lot of interesting talking about the debate tonight here on this program. So we want to begin, as we usually do, by explaining to those of you who are new listeners to ElectionSpeakers.com that we actually score these debates. And I should tell you also, by the way, if you hear a lot of noises in the background, it's because we're coming to you remote tonight from the Fireplace Restaurant in the heart of Brookline, Massachusetts, in Washington Square. Fireplace is the sort of the community and political center of Brookline, so we're delighted to be here and that they're welcoming us. So if you hear clinking and clattering in the background, it's because we're in this popular spot. But I wanted to tell you that if you're listening for the first time, we score these debates, and I'm going to ask Lori Schlaff to explain the scorecard just for a moment, and then we're going to get into the discussion. Lori.
Sure, Dennis. We have a debate scorecard. It has 10 dimensions, including things like body language, facial expression, vocal variety, which is how interesting the candidate is to listen to, connection with the audience. Now, the highest score you can get in each of these 10 dimensions is a 10. So the highest score either Obama or Romney could get is 100.
Mm-hmm. Have we ever had anybody score 100?
No.
Since we've been doing this since 2004 election with Sarah Palin and Joe Biden and all the rest of the personalities. Have we ever had 100?
No one has received 100.
Yeah, the highest score, if I recall, might have been this year with
Julian Castro at the Democratic Convention.
He did a great job. Didn't former President Clinton score very well, too?
Oh, yes. Boy, is he a popular favorite in terms of speaking.
Secretary in charge of explaining things, that
Yes,
guy? Yeah.
There's an article about that written by yours truly on our website. So everyone can download the scorecard.
Yeah, that's an important point, folks. If you're listening to us and you'd like to score along for the next debate, which is on the 22nd of this month, if you'd like to score along with us, just download it at ElectionSpeakers.com. You get a copy of the scorecard, an explanation of how we score. And I should also mention that joining us in the scoring tonight, in addition to our guests here around the radio dial, we have remote judges and critics from around the United States and Mexico. And Lori, you want to say just a word about that before we get into our conversation?
Sure. We're so excited. We have 8 judges from around the country and Mexico, and we're lucky enough to have a wonderful remote judge coordinator, Tara, who is from Emerson College, your alma mater.
My alma mater, right. So Tara will be giving us the scores from around the United States as we go along through the program. In 10 or 15 minutes or so, we'll give you the update on all the tweets and Facebook information that we've gotten from the folks who are listening to us out there. And if you'd like to do that, very easy to do. You know what our tweet is. It's at Speech Improve. Not Speech Improvement, Speech Improve. And, of course, you can always reach us on Facebook. Now, let's get into this conversation.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with our special guest tonight, Kellyanne. Kellyanne, without necessarily going into the specific score, just give me I'll go around the table here quickly. Let's start with Kellyanne, and I'll go to Robin and Ethan. Tell all of us quickly, what did you think? Was this a better debate than the last presidential debate, do you think, and why?
I think it depends on how you define better. I think that's a big word, but to me, it felt more even. Certainly, I found it a little bit more nuanced in terms of who was going to come out on top, bottom, meeting expectations. I think that there was a different feel going into it than there was the last one. But so yeah, I think I would say it had a different feel. I think it's a much smaller audience they're playing to at this point, and I think you saw that.
Good. Robin Maxfield.
I like this format a lot. I like the fact that they didn't have a barrier between them and the audience, and that we could see all of the body language, which is a huge communication tool, huge visual aid.
Now, folks, if you didn't notice already, Robin Maxfield, our speech coach, is recovering from laryngitis. In case you're wondering, we don't all sound like that, but she does tonight. So we're with you. Thanks for being with us. Ethan, how about you? What did you think of this debate tonight, just generally speaking?
I thought this was an excellent example of the difference between using notes and no notes, and how one uses notes. I mean, a lot of times with our clients, when we coach them on public speaking and presentations, we often get asked, hey, should I use notes or not? I think it's okay to use notes when they're used well. In the last debate, I think the notes were that the speakers were both a little bit dependent on the notes. Obama more than Romney on that. So tonight, we didn't see those notes, and you got a chance to see a much stronger connection, much better eye contact in general, much more conversational. So I'm a fan of this format over the other format.
Lori Schloff, what do you think? Better debate tonight than the last presidential?
Totally more interesting to watch, because TV is a visual medium. So there was movement. You could see more of them. You could see the audience members' reaction. It was very, very much more interesting visually. In addition, there was a lot riding on this debate. I mean, everyone's heart was beating fast. How would Obama do? Would Romney hold his own? So I think there was a lot more emotion attached to this one.
Well, Kellyanne, you mentioned you put the word expectation out there before, and the expectation certainly for President Obama was that he needed to do better as a debater than he did the last time around. What do you think?
I think he definitely accomplished that goal, but I think that was part of it for me. I don't think I got as much excitement because I feel like everyone met the expectation that I had for them, because I didn't think we were coming out of this finished. I think we're going to go into the third debate now just as excited as we were for the first two. I think President Obama did what he needed to do. He came out aggressively, but not too aggressively. One concern I had is that he might turn into a bit of a bully if he had gone through too much coaching on how to be aggressive, because that can happen with people when they feel like they need to overcompensate.
Ethan, how do you think did President Obama make up for what was generally perceived as his failing demonstration at the last debate?
Well, he was more effective tonight, for sure, than the last debate. And I think a lot of that is the format. And as an example, it was the mannerisms that he was using when he would come out to rebut ideas, or when both candidates would interrupt each other. So the question is, which interruption came across as more acceptable or tolerant than the other? And I imagine that as people watched this, they first have the biased lens of their fan, the one they favor. And for those who either don't have that lens or who are in the middle, that small audience that Kellyanne was talking about, that's where really the decision has to be made. Was one more rude than the other? What's the difference between rude, aggressive, and arrogant?
It's funny, you mentioned that a few weeks back, those of you who are regular listeners, you know that we did a special program with 3 members of the youth of our nation. We had a 13, a 16, and a 19-year-old on the program with us, and their conclusion was, to the debates and the actual election, was not who's going to be the better president, but who would be the least bad.
That's great.
That's what they said.
That speaks a lot to the narrative we've seen here, too, though. Both candidates are kind of in a position these days of, well, I'm not as bad as the other guy. I mean, that's the theme here, and that's your theme with undecided voters. If you're trying to make a connection with an undecided voter, it's not about them liking you at this point. We've been talking about this election now for 18 months.
So maybe the young people had it right the first time. They're going to be back with us, by the way, at the next debate on the 22nd. We will have those same 3 folks back with us to sort of make a measure of how things have come along and see what their viewpoints are. Well, let's look at the scores for just a moment. And Lori, I'm going to ask you to do your score first, if you will. It's, remember, out of 100 points, what did you total each of the speakers tonight?
Okay, I think they were both effective presenters and debaters. I know I'm using that term loosely since it really was more of a town hall format. I think Obama just wins some points on seeming to come across as authentic and connected. I gave him an 82. Romney absolutely held his own and is an effective speaker. I don't know if he's an effective connector. I gave him a 75.
All right, Robin Maxfield, can we hear your score, please?
I gave Obama a 77, and I gave Mitt Romney a 74. So they were pretty closely tied. I felt Obama's gestures were a little distracting to me. I found them to be repetitive and what you call bandstanding, where he moved his hand when he talked. And once I noticed it, it started to distract me from actually listening. So normally, I would have scored him higher, but that's where as far as body language, I took a bit off for Mitt there. I felt like he's always had that weakness.
The stiffness.
He doesn't use his full body really well. So.
Remember, folks, one of the major purposes for this program, ElectionSpeakers.com, is to help you understand and give you a different lens through which to look at these candidates. When Robin's talking about gesture, she used the term bandstanding. This is a term that we use for speakers who gesture. And you sort of have to visualize this because you're listening to us now.
You've probably seen these people.
You probably have. These are people who, when they speak, they gesture.
With their hands, usually.
When they stop speaking, they don't gesture. As soon as they start talking again, they start gesturing again. Sort of, it gets the name from the band leader who, when he gestures, the band plays. He doesn't, the band doesn't play. So you're saying, Robin, that Obama does that more than Romney? Is that what the point that you're making?
Yeah, I saw that a lot tonight. He was actually going to the cadence of his syllables with his hand,
The first presidential debate, I recall, the same kind of thing, but because we had a different camera shot, it was very interesting because the hands would come in and out of the camera shot. Tonight, with a full body shot, it was much easier to see that kind of thing that you're talking about.
And I think it's important to note that using your hands as a visual aid or as gesturing in presenting and speaking, that by itself really isn't a problem. We make an issue of it when it becomes so significant that it draws attention to itself. Anything that's distraction from the message, we want to coach the speaker to be aware of that. I saw both of the candidates tonight doing it, and it really stood out with Romney first, and then Obama wasn't doing it, and then Obama got into it, and then both of them were doing it on and off and on and off.
Right,
I would have called it on him if I were coaching him in the moment.
Lori.
I just wanted to clarify, because I think this is what you meant, Ethan, is that the research indicates that effective gestures really do add to your message.
They can definitely add.
There's one, this is slightly embarrassing to call out, but as soon as Romney felt a little threatened, he used what is called the fig leaf.
Yep.
And let's put it this way. It's putting your hands over your...
below the belt.
It usually indicates that you're feeling a little insecure. By the way, whenever you're ready, Dennis, our college coordinator, Tara, has the scores from our remote judges.
We'll be there just a minute.
Robin,
you want to make a comment first?
There was just one funny thing that happened if you're able to rewatch it back again when Obama was talking about guns, he made 2 points, and he actually made a gun with his hand.
I saw that.
Kind of funny.
So I don't think
and it wasn't intentional.
It wasn't intentional, but it was funny.
But it was pretty funny.
Demonstrative gesture.
Yeah, Tara. All right, Tara, let's bring you in. Let's see how the remote judges saw this whole thing. Then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics of the debate.
Get real close to it.
Tara?
Okay, so after calculating our scores from the remote judges, our average score for Obama is 89%, and for Romney, 82%.
So again, very close.
Pretty close.
Great. And those
Thanks,
are
Tara.
average scores that have come in from all of the remote judges through Twitter and email and cool.
Lori, where are and who are some of these judges that we have that were remote judges? Can you tell us a little bit about who they are?
So fantastic. They're sending in comments and charts. So we have Sergio, who's in Mexico. We have several judges from the D.C. and Maryland area, which isn't surprising because there's a lot of interest there. We have Deborah, who's in Chicago. and lives very near my client that I'm seeing this Friday, which is Allstate Insurance, which is based in Northbrook, Illinois. We have folks basically from just all around the country, so I'm very, very excited. So they're very thorough, and they had to do some very quick work with this scorecard at ElectionSpeakers.com.
Let's talk a little bit about the issue that came up with the vice presidential debate, which was that interrupting thing. Now, we saw some of it tonight, and I'd like the panel to check in on what you thought of it. Was there too much of it, not enough? Who did more of it? Did it help? Did it hurt? Kellyanne, what do you think about this whole issue of interrupting tonight? And we know with Joe Biden it was a serious issue when he's been criticized heavily. How about tonight? What did you see?
I think that it didn't work for Mitt Romney tonight. I think he did maybe get his point across, so there's that argument that it worked in that sense. He got to speak, he got to talk, but he who yells the loudest does not always win at the end of the day. And I think it came off as a little bit more aggressive and rude this time around than it did last time. He seemed a little bit more desperate to do it again. It was kind of like this worked for me last time, why isn't it working this time? Feeling, if you were just kind of a casual observer, I think.
Ethan, what do you think? Interrupting.
Well, it is something that I know when we're coaching candidates, and I want to be careful not to
mention
divulge.
any names.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Yes, we don't say who we coach, right?
We have to be very sensitive to that. But in the general sense, I know that this is a technique that is coached for campaigns, but it's not easy. It is a very fine line. On the one hand, what you're trying to do is be able to show a sense of authority, that you can defend your point of view and show a sense of command. On the other hand, if you do it, as Kellyanne said, if you come across too arrogant, then it just looks petty, and it can come across. So it's a very fine line, and a lot of times in debate coaching, that's something that's practiced. And when folks are really on their game, it's actually pretty easy to do well. But if you get a little rattled, it's not so easy. And you get emotional, it's not so easy. But keep in mind, these folks, they're people, and they don't do this type of speaking every single day. It's, when they have the debate. So most of the time, they don't get a lot of practice like this, except for the formal practice in the coaching session. So
Robin
you got to cut them a
Maxfield,
little
what do you
slack
think,
for that.
Robin?
I thought that Obama definitely dominated in this as far as interrupting effectively. What he did was he did interrupt. Mitt's got a pattern of interrupting.
With manners.
Mitt has a pattern. He interrupts constantly. Well, I remember when Obama interrupted very powerfully at one point. It was Mitt's turn. Mitt was talking, and he said something like, "Now that's settled." And Obama, I think, had already been seated at that point. He said, "No, it's not settled." With that interruption, it made him appear very powerful, very commanding. He had a great expression on his face when he said that. So he didn't interrupt as often, but I felt like he did it more effectively, because there are times in which you have to say, "No, that's not true. It's not okay." So Obama did a better job of that tonight, I think.
And picking the big issue versus I'm not getting enough time, or what's
Yes,
the time.
whining.
We all have
Yes.
the time who are watching it at home on TV at the bottom of the screen. So kind of fighting that time issue sounds like a small child.
petty,
It doesn't
yeah.
sound presidential. Like, no, that's not settled.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring up about the interruptions, or maybe its distant cousin, which is how do you pick up where the other person left off? And there was at one point near the beginning, Romney did it really well, and Obama had finished speaking, and he picked up saying, "I believe in oil and gas and nuclear." Right, and he picked up and ran with it. Now, here's where I think he actually dropped the ball on this. He said that, which was a nice transition into taking the floor, and then he did something that we work pretty hard on with our clients on. He used a 3-letter word that you are not supposed to say.
B-U-T.
That's right. He said, "I believe in these things, but," which is what we refer to as an erasure word, because it erases the validator. If he had used something like a connective word like "and," "I believe in these things, and then he can take his point anywhere he wants," it would have been a much stronger move and maneuver, because he did do a nice job of just picking right up. It was a perfect flow. He had the floor, and as soon as he said "but," boom, the validation that he had suddenly goes away. And
one of the things about that, and Lori, I want to get your comments on this too. One of the things about that word "but," as Ethan pointed out, we see that as what we call an erasure word. Everything that's said after it erases what was said before it. And it's such a common thing for politicians to do. And as a speaking politician, when you speak, if you can squeeze that word but in there, and they just seem just as powerful as the rest of the story, people tend not to hear the but. So we've had a lot of times this year on both candidates, particularly Mr. Romney, as I understand, that after he has said something, after the event, his campaign needs to walk back the comment. And so, didn't you hear the but part? Nobody hears the but part because it sounds strong. If you're a good speaker, you can just
There's a time and a place
it
it can work really well, you know.
Lori, what about this interruption? What did you feel happened tonight?
If it's okay with you, I would like to comment on the opposite of interruptions, listening. Because listening was such a huge, huge issue in the vice presidential debate. To
What
the
is?
point, listening
sorry,
skills.
That's cheap shot. That's
Ha,
cheap.
ha, ha. Oh, I should know by now. It's only been 30 years.
Yeah, it's too late. It's too
Oh, my
late.
goodness. Anyway, so people who heard Biden on the radio thought he won. People who saw him just thought it was his disrespect in terms of laughing and gestures was outrageous. I think both Obama and Romney were pretty good listeners to each other. I'm going to give Obama slightly higher points. Why? I think his listening was truly authentic. And I think that based on his naturalness, but also, again, his experience. People put him down for being a community organizer, but what does a community organizer do? Listens to the community. I think he has an enormous amount of practice in listening, whereas Romney's listening was, and I think he's sort of a Boy Scout in the sense of he knew it was good to listen, and he showed that he can listen, whether it was from his heart and his soul. I don't think that's as true as with Obama, who truly does value the skill of listening.
Well, it did come across a little bit, that difference of the sort of community organizer versus the CEO. And I think Romney did an effective job of presenting himself as a CEO. Now, the question that perhaps would come out to the floor is that particular profile the profile that somebody would desire? If it is, he did it pretty well. But that sort of CEO in the sense of like, hey, I am in charge, I'm the authority, I am going to tell you what's going on. Obama's approach is a very different leadership style, and it shows in his mannerisms and his communication, which is more democratic or affiliative in that sort of, hey, let's see who has information to contribute to this. Two different styles. Research shows they're both effective in organizations, but you definitely could see the different styles tonight. Which one people like? Well, that's up to the listeners.
In terms of polls, Ethan, what you're saying intersects with some of the sort of pretty consistent research on likability. So someone who is likable, showing empathy, showing concern. That seems to be a pretty consistently in Obama's favor.
We've seen this and heard this on several shows in the past when we've commented on Mitt Romney, that he does talk like a CEO. And one of the disconnects that he has, and part of the likability issue, I think, is the fact that he talks like a CEO. Now, let me break that down for just a second. If you compare the two, as Ethan was doing, take former Governor Romney. When he talks, you hear stop, stop, stop. It's almost nonstop. This is the way a CEO talks. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This is what you have boom. Now, compare that, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just what it is. It's the way he talks, the way he sounds. Forget the contents, the sound I'm talking about. When you hear Obama talk, you get Now, there's pausing in between thoughts or in the middle of thought in some cases. So, what's the difference there? Some folks will hear the Romney style as authoritative and declarative and strong. Others will hear that style as bossy and not listening and so forth. On the Obama side, some folks will hear that as affiliative and contemplative and a good listener. Others will say, what he's talking about. He's hesitating because he's unsure, he's uncertain. So the likability factor comes in part simply because of the sound of the way these folks speak.
Right. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to talk a little bit about the authenticity of how they're speaking too. I think that in a weird way, talking like a CEO really works for Romney because he is a CEO. He feels more comfortable.
Yeah.
And you feel like
point.
You're talking to somebody who's in their comfort zone. It's when he gets off that and he's being questioned and he gets a little bit emotional. That's where you really see the cracks. And I think
I'm still speaking. I'm still speaking.
Because
right?
when you're a
That's what he
CEO
says.
and you're running a
I'm telling
town
you,
hall,
that was a statement, not a
not used to
question.
that.
Yeah,
You're
that's
not
a
used to
statement.
that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Whereas-
Exactly right.
And you know, one thing that's interesting when working with CEOs on this issue, because the research on this topic, by the way, shows that the most effective, the most successful organizations are led by leaders who can change their leadership style based on a particular situation. So what that means is if I'm working with a CEO who has one style, whichever it is, helping them learn the other style it ain't easy. I mean, those who can do it do really well. Many struggle with that because the idea, if you're more authoritative, the idea of being affiliative and so forth can be
Feels
offensive.
weak.
And the reverse is true. People who are affiliative can't deal with the idea of, I shouldn't sound that authoritative.
Very true,
So it's a skill building thing that during a campaign, tough to do when you've got 10 different advisors all telling you what you should sound like. It's not easy.
Obama tonight seemed to me to be more in his comfort zone because, just take the settings. The last time we saw him, behind a podium, standing still, zero reaction from the audience. Okay, we had relatively zero reaction tonight from the audience, but he had the opportunity to move towards, physically move towards, to turn around, to look at other members of the audience. Now think of where he is most dynamic as a speaker. Not necessarily when he's behind a podium, looking at a teleprompter, but more so when he's in front of a crowd, roll up his sleeves, right? And he reacts to the cheering and the booing and the hissing. Man, he's on his game. That's a little bit more of what we had tonight, and as a result, he was a little bit more on his game, it seemed to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's one point in particular, well, there are a few points that Obama really hit his zone. One of them was when he was rebutting the idea that he had used the death of the American Embassy ambassador, that he was using that for political gain. The way that he rebutted that,
Did he ever?
Beautiful.
that was one of those moments when a politician was in the zone, he looked sincere, and it was also under the eye contact category. One of the few times he looked his competitor in the eye, and didn't just turn away. Because earlier on, I
It's
had
almost a
made note.
reprimand, like.
Yeah. Earlier on, both of them were guilty of sort of. They would give their little jab at the other and then turn away, like break the eye contact. But in that moment, it was clear and declarative, and it was
it was
pretty
presidential.
impressive. Very presidential.
Yeah, you really saw and heard. I saw and heard, felt the
Conviction.
passion
Yeah.
in his statement, not just the words, but the way. I thought he presented that segment and section, and they're different than almost everything else in the evening.
You know,
Lori?
one thing we always look for in a president is staying cool under pressure. So I guess an interesting question, because we're sort of saying both folks are cool under pressure, and I haven't talked to quote unquote Romney's people, but I have had the opportunity to talk to people who work with Obama, and they said the guy just does not get angry or rattled. And I think what you're pointing out, Ethan, is sort of that is Obama when he's upset or angry.
Well, it also
piercing
saw
did
here,
show
yeah.
it did show some variety. I mean, the reality is we saw that in his style tonight. There were manners being used, very personal communication, that affiliative approach. Most of the questions he answered starting with the person's name. You know, very personable. And then there was a moment of authoritativeness. So we saw that sort of that spread of the different approaches. Now, Romney can do that. I don't know that he did it tonight. I mean, my scores, the last debate, I had Romney with a higher score. Not tonight. I had Romney at 77 and Obama at 81. And many of the scores I had them as pretty close. Let's see where some of the noticeable differences were. Speed, pace. I had Romney had, I believe, different pacing. I gave him a 9 and I gave Obama a 6. Mostly because I'm mixed on this, because I like Obama's pacing because he allows people to think about the thoughts. Where it got me, where his score dropped is that it became repetitive. I wrote the pattern down. It was a 3-8-16 pattern. He'd say 3 or 4 words, pause, 7 or 8 words, pause, and then 16 words, pause. And it repeated almost. It became very
ramp up?
predictable. Yeah,
People have
yeah.
said he
So,
has to ramp up.
You know what? And Kellyanne, you might have some thoughts on this from a soundbite perspective. It's probably exactly what the press are looking for. If I'm an editor, hey, that made my life really easy. So I don't know if he does that on purpose or not.
The president, you can tell, has had some sort of training or has thought long and hard about sound bites or talks in sound bites, which some people do. It's just their natural style, and it can be really, really effective when you're looking at what gets pulled out the next morning. It can also be annoying, and it can also come off as non-genuine at times.
This is an interesting thing, because the reason I gave it a lower score was that in long-form presentation, meaning 10 minutes or more, that will put listeners into a trance and become hypnotic. Where maybe my score is a little bit off would be if his target audience is the media, which of course it is for these, then it could be very effective. But long form, that would probably put people to sleep.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trained speech pathologist. The speech pathology community doesn't see it as deliberate. We actually see it as
That's interesting.
As a problem, as actually a fluency problem. That's absolutely not deliberate. That he just is not a particularly fluent speaker, so he has to ramp up in terms of his word count. Dennis, when you get a chance, some of our remote judges have pretty provocative comments that Tara's going to share.
All right. Tara, you want to come in? Are you ready? Come on in. And then after that, I want to talk to you folks. Start thinking a little bit about Candy Crowley, how she did. We'll talk about the moderator right after this. Go ahead, Tara.
I thought 2 comments were particularly provocative.
Really close to that.
Yeah, and they both relate. Michelle Morris said, I feel the president presented with a little more specificity on counterpoints than Governor Romney. However, the president's nods of agreement when the governor would go on the offensive was surprising. Similarly, Deborah Poneman said Romney's unrestrained aggression and his blatant questioning of Obama's integrity went over the line, especially when addressing the man who is still the president of the United States.
Interesting comments.
You know,
Provocative.
It's interesting because one of the things I had brought up right after the debate is Romney does have a habit of doing this, where he has come out aggressive in the campaign and then oversteps a little bit at some point. He thinks the aggression thing's really working for him. We saw it with the bet with
$10,000. I bet you $10,000.
Exactly, in the primary. And we saw it in Massachusetts going back years when he ran against Ted Kennedy. He asked Ted Kennedy, what are you going to do for women? And Ted Kennedy just responded by saying, no one's done more in the Senate for women than me. So this is something he does when he feels he kind of bets it all on red, you know?
Yeah, that's what CEOs do.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Candy Crowley for just a moment. She's the moderator, and the moderators in the 2 preceding debates that we've had took a lot of criticism. How do you think, Robin Maxfield, how do you think that Candy Crowley did tonight as a moderator containing these folks or not containing them?
Boy, she had a tough job. I think I sent a tweet out that said, I bet she has a hidden whip underneath that desk, because she definitely she took her job seriously and did, tried as hard as she could to keep them. I thought she did a great job.
Ethan, how about you?
Well, I think she'll have a great time talking to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to say, yes, I told the President of the United States to sit down.
Very funny.
She actually said that to Mr. Romney.
And, well, yeah, both sides. I think of both. I mean, maybe not that literally, but no, I think she did a great job. It's not easy. Look, both candidates have been trained to perhaps steal as much time as they can until they're told to stop talking.
Yeah.
And
And
I don't like that technique, but it is there.
Robin?
So.
She really meant what my bus driver used to say in elementary school: sit down and shut up.
She meant it. Now, Kellyanne, in the work that you do in your work at Rasky Berline, you deal with strategic communication issues all the time. How do you think she did strategically in terms of handling 2 very high-powered, important, prominent folks? Did she stand her position, or how'd she do?
I think she stood her ground. I think it's always hard for anchors of television shows when they get into this format, because typically they're not used to being questioned on their show like this. You have the odd time where it happens, but typically they're used to being in control of their show and being sort of the big dog on their set. And in a presidential debate, you don't come from that place of strength. And it is kind of you want to come out of this with as few people as possible saying you're biased. That's really going to be your goal. We saw at times the time clock go to different points, and trying to balance that in terms of who do I let speak now? How much do I let them speak? Do I let one candidate go a little bit more over because they've gotten a couple minutes behind? She had to really factor in all those things, and I think she did a really good job. I think she was hard with both of them, and she let both of them off the hook a couple times, which is...
Seems fair?
Seems fair.
Okay, Lori Slough, how did she do?
I heard her say, yesterday on a TV show that she would just let it rip if she needed to. And Tara was telling me that one of our judges from Mexico made a comment, which I thought was pretty astute, related to comparing Candy to Martha Crowley.
To Martha Raddatz, you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I say?
To Martha Raddatz.
To Martha
Yeah.
Raddatz.
Sergio said, let us say that Candy did a great job, but everything about the moderator, it is now going to be measured against what Martha did in the VP debate. Yeah.
All right. Well, and Martha got measured against what Jim Laird did. and
Right.
so
Well,
forth.
Martha, I'd say I'm going to give, if we're scoring the moderators, I give the highest points to Martha. She just seemed to have the most presence.
And interestingly enough, she's a reporter, not a host.
Yeah.
So what does that say?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I thought Candy did a very good job tonight. I was glad to see her be tough and relatively fair with both of them, I thought. And I would agree. I thought she did the best of the... Well, Laura, I probably don't agree with you. I think she did better than Martha Raddatz,
yeah?
actually. I think she was a much more
well.
in-control person.
Who cares? I don't think there should be a moderator. But that's a separate show.
Yeah, that is a separate show. Speaking of separate shows, this is about as much time as we have for this one. So I'm going to go around the radio dial one last time, starting with Robin Maxfield, and ask you, just give me a general sense, who won this debate tonight? Robin Maxfield.
I'd have to say Obama.
Kellyanne.
I'm closer to a draw, but if I had to make a choice, I would go Obama as well.
Lori Schloff, what do you think? Who won this debate?
Obama won in terms of authenticity and connection, but not by a ton.
Ethan Becker, who won?
Yeah, I think Obama took it. I think he brought his game tonight and took the debate.
All right, folks, it's up to you now. We're giving you information that you can judge with when you get there on November the 6th. And remember, we have one more big and important debate to come on the 22nd of this month, and we will be here with you, watching and listening, offering a critique following. We'd like to hear from you in the meantime. And Lori, you had something to say, Lori?
I was just wondering, would the debate be held?
Oh, yeah, we're going to be right back here at the Fireplace Restaurant in Brookline, Massachusetts, right in Washington Square. The Fireplace, the heart of community and political entertainment and information here in Brookline. So you're certainly welcome to come by. Remember, you can always pick up a scorecard at ElectionSpeakers.com to know exactly what we're scoring on and exactly why those things are important. It's a really interesting and helpful scorecard if you haven't seen it yet. One side has the sort of a score chart, and the other side has an explanation of all of the scoring. So feel free to pick that up. Ethan.
I'd just add one last thought is for folks who are listening to our show and then wondering why we're not talking about sort of the main thing that is most likely in all of the headlines and the reports, which is that one part of the debate where it
gotcha lines.
The gotcha lines where Romney
zingers.
was mentioned about the terrorist, and you said it the next day in the Rose Garden, and no, it didn't. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
That's probably right. Well, we're not focused on that so much because we're really more interested in the rhetorical component of the debate.
Right, the
So
purpose of
that's
this-
great news, but it's a little different from what we're focused on for the show.
It is, and it's one of the things that makes this show important out there in the United States, and we're happy to hear from all of you. We hear from folks all the time, and not just from the United States, about how valuable it is to hear something about the process of the debate and the process and the tools and tricks and techniques that the candidates use. And so this is what we're trying to do on this show, to give you something to vote on in those cases. If you have other questions or concerns, don't hesitate. ElectionSpeakers.com. We'll answer all of them. And we'll be back with you at the end of the next debate on the 22nd of this month. And that's all we have time for right now on this edition of ElectionSpeakers.com. But we'll be back with you at that time, right after the next debate, with the most unique critique of these most important speakers in this 2012 presidential campaign. So until that time, thanks to all of our coaches and, of course, our very special guest, Kellyanne Dignan. Sorry, Kellyanne, I'm very sorry.
Hey, I've heard worse.
Okay, thank you for that. You're very kind. So until then, I'm Dr. Dennis Becker saying thanks for listening and bye for now.